A warm welcome to today's game, which was between Bobby Fischer and Pal Benko in 1963 in the US Championships. Now, we come into this game where Fischer is on an amazing 10 out of 10, and this is the 10th round. This is the championship where Fischer went 11 out of 11. We had this wonderful game against Pal Benko in the Pirc Defense that Benko played, and we're going to see how Fischer just absolutely dismantled him. So the game began with e4, g6, d4, bishop g7, knight c3, d6, f4. This is the Austrian attack, and here you can see that white has taken a big center, taking control over all of these squares. And the idea is that black then plays knight f6. The idea with this is that black is going to try and hope to later undermine these advanced pawns and attack that way, whereas white is just going all in, straight out attack mode. So it always is quite a combative and attacking game when you get the Austrian attack against the Pirc defense. So Fischer then played knight f3. We got castles, bishop to d3. We got bishop to g4. The idea, of course, is that sometimes in the Pirc, the light squared bishop for black can be a bit of a problem, so he just wants to trade it off very simply. So you get h3, bishop takes, queen takes, knight c6, e3, which is a great move apparently, e5, and here we have an interesting we've got a series of choices that Fischer could do. So one, for instance, is to go d5. So if you went d5, we could get knight to d4. After bishop takes, e takes, and then knight to b5. We can get rook to e8. And so here black would be giving up a pawn to get some attacking chances down the open e file, and obviously split up white's connected pawns if they capture. So sacking a pawn, but going for a position. But in the game we see that Fischer instead decides to go d takes e5, then we get d takes e5, and then we get f5. So f5 here, extremely aggressive, but you would think, okay, well, what would Benko do here? And it's safe to say that Benko probably is suffering from the fact that Fischer is having such a wonderful tournament, and he probably gets a little bit, he starts seeing ghosts here. Because instead of playing something, he could have played a number of moves here. He could have played knight to d4 attacking, and then after queen f2, could then take on the pawn here. Or he could instead go bishop takes, and after the pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and rook to e8. You get your piece back with some extra, as they say, or you're certainly threatening to get it back with extra. But instead in the game we get, after here, we get a very strange move by Benko, which was to take with these g-pawn, which opens up, of course, and makes all these squares a little bit weaker around the king. And after queen f5, showing the folly of not getting your move in here, now moves the knight in, but of course your tempo down. We go queen f2, then we go knight to e8. Could have also played knight h5, hoping to get into the, play on the dark squares here. Fischer then castles. We get knight to d6, with the idea probably of playing f5, but he doesn't play f5. And here we see Fischer go on a very interesting queen walk. He goes queen to g3, then we get king to h8. Now, what could have been played, of course, was f5. And after f5, you go h6. But then after the queen to f6, bishop takes, king takes, taking the pawn, and then knight takes. You've got a very even end game here. Material is the same. You've got this pawn that's pushing, that's possibly weak, but other than that, it looks a very simple way to end the game. But we see in the game here that Benko decides to go h8 and then queen g4 by Fischer. Then we get c6. Now here we see c6 the idea is to stop the knight from moving forward. And here again, Benko showing that he's been reactive, possibly thinking, trying to play defensive. Should have been playing a bit timid, to be honest, here against Fischer, who is absolutely destroying all the grandmasters. So he needed to be more proactive. And then we get h5, and we see the queen has now gone from f2 to g3 to g4 to h5. And now we get queen e8, which is an interesting move by Benko, possibly thinking, well, I can push the f5 pawn and then we're going to have to trade off, and it can go into all sorts of everything. But here we get bishop takes d4, and we're going to get a series of really wonderful moves by Fischer. After e takes, can you see the brilliant move? And can you see why it's a brilliant move? I don't think I would ever find this in a million years. It is rook to f6. Now, why is rook to f6 such a great move? Because can you see why it's a great move? Is it not just giving up the rook for free? So let's say we take, what does Fischer play here? Well, he plays this beautiful move, e5. And now we've got mate n3, because if you go e4, all you're doing is delaying the inevitable, and eventually it's checkmate. So really crafty move here by Fischer when he goes. So there's not a whole lot to do. Benko tries to go here back to g8, but here we get another possible line. But very simply we get e5. Now the whole idea of e5 is, again, we're threatening mate here, and he just needs to move the knight away. Because let's say, for instance, if we take here, well, then it's just mate in one. If we go here, again, we're facing the same issues. It's, constantly, whatever you do, you could go here and you're setting yourself up for a mate again. So a great move. And in the game we got h6. So what can we do here from h6? Well, we've seen this. So h6 is played, and we get the beautiful move knight to f2. And the whole idea is that ultimately you're just waiting. This knight is hanging. It can't be moved because, say for instance, it goes here. Well, then again, you're facing mate in one. So it was in this position after another brilliant move of knight to e2, again sacking the rook, that Benko ended up resigning. So a really wonderful attack by Fischer. A very interesting game.